1. I was a teenager at the time, and my father had just been let go at work. We lived in my parents' dream home in a hole-in-the-wall town called Brookfield, New Hampshire, and they absolutely hated that we had to move. We ended up finding a home for rent in Wolfboro Falls that was a historical site built in 1800 and listed from 1912 as the location of the history of Wolfboro was written. This is where things started to get a bit weird. I've always been very sensitive to the paranormal, as well as my dad. The house we lived in before, where I practically grew up until we moved, did not have any bad spirits, but I would tell my mom there was a woman and a baby in my closet. I would tell her people talked in my bedroom, etc. My dad had the same experiences with talking, but that was the extent of the activity in that house. The house we rented, however, was absolutely riddled with activity. My dad took one step in and decided he would be staying in our former home until the very last minute he could. He stayed with just a reclining chair and fridge completely by himself, even after my mom voiced how much she hated the idea. We didn't really have anything happening when it was my mom, myself, and my two brothers, but when my dad was literally forced to start actually sleeping in this house, the atmosphere was completely different. We started hearing disembodied knocking on the walls, footsteps up and down the hallways, and capturing orbs and photos that were so crystal clear that you could see the actual electricity of them. Our 3 cats would stare at the corner of our dining room wall between the downstairs bathroom and living room so intensely that even clapping their face or picking them up wouldn't make them flinch. They sat there for a solid 30 minutes straight just watching that damned corner almost every day. That corner was also where my older brother's friend and his girlfriend took one look at and refused to come back to our house. They never said why, but I'm guessing it wasn't a good reason. My brother started sleeping in his car that he parked in the parking lot of the church across the street. My father started heavily drinking, to the point that my mom told him to choose alcohol or us. And he only answered with, "Well, it's gonna be hard to say goodbye." And that absolutely terrified me. And my little brother, who was extremely mild-mannered and complained about next to nothing, started telling my mom he hated the house so much it made him angry. He started to self-harm in the form of digging his own nails into his forearms whenever he got that level of angry. And people actually started refusing to enter our house. My young cousins called our attic the ghost place, with zero prompting, and because of that my mom went up and started taking pictures, asking questions, etc. Which was a bad idea. After she did that, my closet door would slam open and shut at random times during the night. Knocking started on my little brother's bedroom wall that he would ask to stop because it was scaring him. It would actually stop for a good 15 minutes before starting up again, and he usually ended up going downstairs to avoid it. And our house was suddenly infested with bees, ants, and fleas, all of which we had literally never had a problem with. My dad was still out of work because he'd gotten a medical-related disability that almost killed him, twice. So he would be at home during the day by himself. And one day he was folding clothes when he heard what he still swears sounded like someone running down the stairs in heavy boots. He literally thought it was my brother and came out of the master bedroom to yell at him, but there was nobody else in the house. He still gets noticeable goosebumps talking about it. At that point, my parents decided we needed to get the hell out of that place. We packed up, took the first place we found, and tried to inform the landowner that her damn house was haunted. She called up my mom and said that even with multiple exterminators they couldn't stop the infestations for close to a year, and they were all completely baffled. My mom and I drove a few years back while visiting friends. We moved down to North Carolina after my parents divorced nearly 9 years ago, and I had just glanced at it out of curiosity to see if it was rented out again. Nobody was living in the house. No lights were on, no cars in the driveway. but there was someone standing in the first floor window looking at us. And it still makes me sick to my stomach thinking about it. It was dark and kind of murky looking, like if you stand behind one of the thick screen doors, which was impossible because the windows were glass. It happened very quickly, then vanished. And I didn't say anything in case it scared my mom, but she actually ended up slamming on the brakes and asking if I saw what she saw. I didn't see features, just what I can call an idea of a face. And she swears she saw an older woman. But all I know for damn sure is that was 100% not a normal face. I will never, and I repeat, never, go back to the fucking house. So, whoever decides to live in 119 Center Street, just be careful. It's a gorgeous home, and has a nice location, but the damage that house did to my family is still very present nearly a decade later. I have never hated anything as much as I still hate that house. 2. The purpose of writing about my experiences is trying to understand why this has been happening to me since I was a toddler. I know houses can be haunted, but can people be haunted? What and why did something possibly attach to me at a young age and continue to follow me? I don't feel like spirits in my first house were the same spirits in my second house, but I have never really had a break from the supernatural. Every single place I have lived, house or apartment, has had unexplained things happen. I had an incident the other night that prompted me to start sharing my story. I need to talk about this. Every place I go can't be haunted. It has to be me who is haunted. The sixth sense, insidious, or even poltergeist. Not every aspect. That's me. Yes, I do see dead people. I feel them, I hear them. I always have for 32 years. Haunted outside of my home. After being haunted for 16 years, I simply started to have a very depressed, I don't care what happens kind of mentality. So when my friends wanted to start visiting really haunted locations, I joined in because nothing could be worse than what I dealt with daily at home. I grew up in a small southern Indiana town that was full of history, hauntings, and urban legends. The town was the first state capital of Indiana, the location of a battle from the Civil War, and home of dozens of myths and legends. We also lived about 30 miles away from Waverly Hills Sanitarium, which provided excellent ghost hunting grounds if you were sneaky. Physical encounter. Lickford Bridge. Lickford Bridge is possibly one of the more famous urban legends in the area. There are several different versions of this myth, but I think the most popular was that he, Lickford, was a very sadistic man and would hang his slaves from the bridge for fun. Some say he murdered his family in the run-down house not too far from the bridge. For me, the myths didn't bother me. For me, he bothered me. I could immediately tell when Lickford was around. I visited the bridge and the house many times. I would feel extremely nauseous, weak, and my heart would beat extremely fast. It is now as I am writing about this. This was the first time ever that I was physically injured from a spirit. I remember one specific time going to the bridge for fun. I had two friends with me, one a complete skeptic. I got out of the car and stood nearly paralyzed looking down at the end of the bridge. Lickford was there, and I could see him as a full apparition just staring me down with his red eyes, daring me to walk on his bridge. My friends didn't notice him at first and just kept walking on the bridge, making fun of me because I wouldn't go, despite telling them he was there. They still went on the bridge, only to come running back. At this point you could hear whispers, and the temperature felt like it dropped 20 degrees. They ran back screaming and jumped in the car. However, I didn't move. Not yet. I just watched him, shivering in midsummer. He began to come closer. His eyes got brighter. I always compared them to red lightning bugs, and the whispers got louder. He was getting too close, so I also ran to the car and we drove off. I know you aren't supposed to look, but I did, and caught his red eyes again. Weeks following this experience, my house was extra active, and the energy was heavy. I would see 2 red dots everywhere, in the woods, in the reflection of the windows, and in the basement. I was convinced Lickford followed me home, and that the only way to get him to leave me alone was to go back to the bridge, so I did. However, this time I went to the house too. There really wasn't much left standing, but there were stairs that led to a second floor. In hindsight, this was not the smartest decision, but I decided to go upstairs. I didn't expect much. Again, just a very heavy, negative energy. My friend that came with me was still downstairs. I was talking to her, and I was getting ready to walk back down, and I felt something grab my hair and put hands on my back. I didn't get time to react before I was physically pushed down the stairs. I did not fall or trip. I was pushed so hard that I skipped the first 2 stairs and went tumbling down. It was terrifying. I just started screaming at him to leave me alone. Since I was covered in blood, we immediately left after this, only driving across the bridge, not stopping and not looking back. I would like to say that was the end, but it only intensified everything at home. Lickford may not have been there, but he left a residual negative energy that the existing spirits fed off of. Casey Cemetery, Gates of Hell. The name says it all. I don't know why I thought this was a good idea. We drove about an hour to get to this location, and I could only stay about 20 minutes. Besides Waverly Hills, this is probably one of the more active locations I have visited. I visited a year ago and still had the same sensation. This cemetery had a very interesting setup. It is on the end of a gravel road, and you can tell it's not been used in years. You pull up to the cemetery and there is a little dirt path that takes you to a circular grassy area with 3 trees in the middle. On the side of the pathway are scattered headstones that are broken and unreadable. However, once you get to the middle, there aren't any headstones in the circle, but instead they just surround the circle. It was midsummer and this place was freezing. Once I made it to the middle, I could see my breath. It was sickening being there. You could see all of these shadow figures just running around the circle. They were darker than the darkness of night. Everywhere you would look, you would see one. I remember feeling so dizzy and discombobulated. My friends were taking pictures left and right, and I decided to lean up against one of the trees in the middle. I had a very cold and tingly sensation go up my arm, and felt another hand grab my hand. It felt like a small hand, like a child's hand. I saw my friends in front of me while I was holding hands with something that did not come with us, and my heart dropped and I froze. I just started crying because I couldn't even speak. My friends noticed and immediately started taking pictures and looking around the trees. I was still frozen. I don't know if it was because of fear. They didn't find anything, of course, but whatever was holding my hand finally left. I literally felt it let go of my hand, and the coldness disappeared with it. We all ran back to the car, but not before taking pictures again of the trees, once we were back on the pathway. After reviewing the pictures, we weren't expecting to catch what we did. 2 of the pictures had a man with red eyes, and what looked like a straw hat on, peeking around the tree I was leaning against. He had one hand visible on the tree. Behind him were several shadow figures in the woods. Some were huge, and some were very small. Ironically, the next day the camera disappeared along with any evidence we had captured. Just seeking answers. 3. The paranormal has always been a thing that's been present in my life for as long as I can remember. I'm not going to get into details with it because then this would be too long. Fast forwarding to when I was in high school. I remember I went to the restroom to take off my contacts. Directly in front of the entrance to the restroom is a hallway that leads to the bedroom of my oldest sister. She doesn't live with us anymore. For some reason, the door is always open, so I began to close it any time it was open. I was not afraid because the lights from the restroom were bright enough to light up my sister's door. On the particular day that she made herself known, or so I think it's the first time, the light was not reaching the door. I noticed when I walked into the restroom from my room that yet again that damned door was open. I brushed it off and proceeded to take my contacts off in front of the mirror that was facing my sister's door. I didn't really think anything about it because I was already used to it, and really didn't give it much thought. When I took off my first, I squirted the solution into the contact and placed it in its container. When I looked up, I saw her with my right eye. I didn't scream, flinch, or run. I stared in disbelief, and she angrily stared back at me with her glossy black eyes, her skin pale like paper and her dress matching the blackness of her eyes. Her dress looked like it was from the 18th century, with a flowery, see-through mesh covering her pale arms. I remember every detail because I had never been so startled in my life, despite it occurring more than 7 years ago. It's just one of those things that you cannot unsee. Anyways, I blinked, thinking I was going insane, and she got closer. With every blink, she took a step forward, until she had her mouth gaping open when she was behind me, and I saw nothing but darkness. I rapidly turned around and saw absolutely nobody. I snatched my contact case and ran in my room. I took off my contacts in my room since I had already washed my hands. I sat on my bed in disbelief and fear, knowing that there was actually a ghost in my house. Worst of all, I knew it was malicious. After this happened, I would hear occasional footsteps in my attic, particularly above my parents' room. My mom would hear the heavy footsteps too, but she just never really wanted to admit it. Nothing too crazy happened again. A couple of years had passed, and I was now in college. I decided to stay a couple years in my hometown because it was cheaper, and because I wanted to be with my friends more before we officially split, as things usually go when people move out of town. I remember I had just finished my calculus homework and decided to browse the internet and watch some ghost videos. By this time I had decided to ignore whatever was in my house and just continue with my life as if nothing happened. I was watching a compilation of ghost videos when I heard someone in my mom's room. I at first thought it was my mom, so I ignored it. I then heard it coming down the steps rapidly and turned left to head to the garage. My mom smokes in the garage, so this reinforced the thought that it was most definitely her. I mean, the thought of footsteps sounding so clear and it not being my mom seemed ridiculous to me. I texted my mom the usual, "You gonna smoke again?" I rolled GIF. She responded with, "What are you talking about? I went out with your dad because a cousin of mine came into town." My heart dropped to my stomach so hard when I read that. I stared forward and was frozen. I remember thinking that I was screwed because whatever it was came back. I got my laptop and journal with my homework, and right when I was about to go upstairs, I heard something running down the hallway into the kitchen and ram into the cabinets in front of me. It passed so fast that there was even a breeze that caused a fly swatter on the cabinet's knob to start spinning furiously. I was freaking out, and I ran to the living room to get my backpack, because I was planning on leaving. As I was packing all my things, I heard a doorknob turn up, then down. I looked to my left and saw the door to the laundry room slowly opening. This posed a significant obstacle to me, because the laundry room is diagonal to the door of the garage. I heard voices whispering as I made my way into the garage. Fighting the urge to look in, I shut my eyes tight and went into the garage and left my house. Nothing happened after that. It seems like my paranormal experiences occur in extreme but isolated occasions. Thankfully, I graduated and moved away, but my experiences were far from over. I was now in a university and living my life independently as I'd always wanted. It seemed like an exciting experience for me, because I didn't have anybody to tell me what to do or set curfews for me. Occasionally, my girlfriend would come and stay over with me. We'd go out to the mall or to the movies, and do our homework when we came back and watch TV together. I wouldn't really watch horror movies because she was scared, so I just put on action movies. I had forgotten about my paranormal experiences until the woman came back again. But this time it was in my dreams. The setting of the dream took place in a past time in a mansion, or so I believe, and people were celebrating. I got the impression that it was a different time because there were torches and chandeliers with candles rather than light bulbs. I was admiring the place because it was just so beautiful and breathtaking. I was really fascinated and could not stop looking around. Then I felt a soft hand take mine. I looked at the owner of the hand, and it was a woman smiling at me. She looked to be in her mid-20s. She had soft brown eyes, rosy cheeks, and her dark curly hair was up. She told me to follow her, and when I questioned her, she replied with a teasing tone, "Don't be scared." I followed her into a chamber where she led me to a bookcase. She opened the bookcase, and behind it was a door. I walked into a giant room that connected to another smaller section. This room had a fireplace, and there were other people in all black sitting there. The furniture looked like it was from the Renaissance era, but decorated with gold rather than wood. I remember the cushion was red. There was a series of bookcases against the wall on the left, and the small section I previously described was on the right. The people who were all in black stared and had a smile that made me feel like they were hiding their intentions. Once again, the young woman told me to follow her. She grabbed my arm and pushed me towards a section on the right where I saw a man sitting down in front of another fireplace. He spun his chair and told me to sit. I sat and asked him why the woman took me here. I don't exactly remember what exactly we said during our exchange, but he was telling me that he needed something from me. He would not tell me what he wanted. He first tried to convince me by saying that he knew what I was going through. He was going to make all my problems go away, and I would be happier than ever. I remember him saying, "If you thought you were happy right now, then wait until you see how happy I can make you." I remembered this because as soon as he started saying all those things, I immediately knew there was a catch. I felt like something was wrong, but I couldn't figure it out. I interrupted him and told him to get to the point. He told me to swear my allegiance to him and denounce God. I remember looking back and said, "What?" He said I knew who he was and he knew me. He then clarified himself and said he wanted my soul. I said, "No, I'm not going to give you anything." He climbed on the table and he got me by the shirt and began screaming over and over to give him my soul. I pushed him off and the young woman grabbed me, only this time her face was pale and eyes dark. She threw me on the floor and opened her mouth and let out a deafening scream. It was her, the woman. I woke up gasping for air and saw a dark figure next to my curtain over me, and another one by the restroom in my room. I can't say what I saw was actually something because I had literally jolted out of a nightmare, so it may have been my eyes playing tricks on me. This is my experience with the paranormal. Before people say it, no, it's not fabricated, and I wish it was. It's something that's on my mind constantly. I tried looking for the answer to my dream, but I've decided to not keep looking. It took me a long time to build up the courage to say this, but after months, I did it. The only things I've experienced now are things being in different places, and a single knock that I always hear in my front door whenever I'm watching TV or when I walk past my front door. 4. When I was a child, I had a handful of paranormal experiences from around 5 to 11 years old that I am still unable to fully comprehend. I haven't talked about it much to anyone as I've gotten older, because I've mostly grown out of it. But my experience was so surreal, and everything was so vivid. that I haven't been able to forget it after almost 12 years. It started when I was 5 and had an imaginary friend named Jordan. I don't really remember him much, but my mom says that I talked about him constantly for around a year. She figured it was just a typical childhood imaginary friend. Until a few years later when something strange happened. I was around 8 years old and had been over Jordan for around 2 years. Long story short, my mother and grandmother were having issues, and my mother set up a hidden recording tape, trying to catch something my grandmother was saying. This was back in the mid-2000s, and the recording was done on an old-fashioned tape recorder. When my mother played the tape back, she was surprised to find a snippet of a strange voice in the middle of the recording. It was distorted, and didn't sound anything like human, and it was difficult to make out what it was saying. Curious, my mom took it to her techie friend, who was able to slow down the recording a little bit. While they weren't 100% sure exactly what it said, it sounded like the voice was saying, "Hey, it's Jordan. I hope you're doing well. See ya." My second experience was shortly after this at around 9 years old. Me and my cousin were in the bathtub at my house, just sitting there giggling about something as little girls do, when suddenly the light bulb directly above the bathtub shattered. The room went dark and my cousin and I started screaming. My parents ran in and turned on a different light in the bathroom. The glass was all in the bathtub, and overall my cousin and I suffered a few cuts. This could be due to reasons not paranormal, but looking back, I believe it was. My third experience was a few months after again in this bathroom. I was sitting once again in the bathtub, but this time with my little sister. We were just sitting there, waiting for my parents to come up and help us out of the tub, when suddenly the bathroom sink turns on by itself. I remember literally watching it turn on, and the water coming out and there being nobody there. We both screamed and my parents rushed in and said it must have been a sudden surge in the water supply. At the time I accepted that as an answer, but after my last and final experience, I am sure it was something more. My last experience was at 11 years old. We were moving out of my childhood home, and my parents were outside in our shed trying to sort through some of our things. My sister and I were inside watching TV, and during a commercial break, I got up to go to the bathroom. I got up, flushed the toilet, and started washing my hands, when I strangely heard the toilet flush again. I turned around and instantly locked eyes with a man standing in the doorway. He was tall and older and very pale. I remember he was holding a towel and was dressed in what I thought was a suit. He was just staring at me with a blank expression, and I was momentarily frozen just staring at him. After what seemed like forever, I finally ran out towards the other bathroom door. The bathroom had 2 entrances, and went outside crying with soap still in my hands to tell my parents there was a man in the house. My dad searched every room, but there was no one to be found. I still don't understand what I saw. After we moved out of that house, I never had a paranormal experience again. I don't know why I saw this man, what he was, or what happened, or why he was holding a towel. I did not recognize the man at all. For all I know, it could have been a real person in the house, but that is unlikely as there is only one entrance and exit, and he would have had to walk past me and my sister watching TV to get to the bathroom. I'm usually a skeptical person, but I cannot deny what I saw. My mother, who grew up in that house from the time she was a young child to an adult, also claims she's had many paranormal experiences that she's never been able to explain. Still freaks me out to this day. 5. How do I start this off? Well, I have a twin brother, a little brother, and an older sister. I've had a dog named Honey, which will come into play later on. Honey has died before these events started. Throughout all of the odd things that have happened, I'm still kind of skeptical, or scared to face the truth that I believe in it, and more activity will occur. I'm 24 now, so this activity has been going on for so long that I dismiss it. Oddly enough, I've never asked my family members if they have witnessed anything except my twin brother. He notices out of the ordinary events going on as well. I'm going to start from when I was young all the way up until now. I've lived in multiple houses and states, so please bear with me here. When I was about 8 or 9 or 10 years old, I lived in an older house in St. Petersburg, Florida. I remember 2 events right off the top of my mind. There was one incident as to where I woke up randomly from my sleep and looked over at my twin brother, and his arms, head, and legs were abnormally long. I remember running across the room and slept on my sister's floor. I'm not sure why this happened, but I can still remember that moment. In that same house, I was on the 2nd floor of the house using the restroom, and I ran out of toilet paper. I yelled and yelled for my brother to get me some toilet paper, and I heard what sounded like 2 girls laughing and running. This quite literally scared the shit out of me. When my brother came up the stairs, I yelled at him, and not him, not to laugh and run around as I needed toilet paper, though I knew that it wasn't his voice. My brother called me the kind of name that siblings are wont to call each other, and he and I kept arguing so I wasn't alone up there, as I was scared shitless. The laughing almost sounded dark, as if they were trying to scare me. There was another event on that same floor, which is essentially another apartment. By the spiral stairs, I was getting my mother a drink from the refrigerator, and to the left of my eye, I saw Honey laying there, showing her teeth. I looked over and she was gone. Now, I knew that Honey wasn't with us anymore, but I just kept on with my life, dismissing it as nothing. Sometime around this time, my little brother was like 4 years old, and he would sit in the corner of the back room and giggle and talk. Now, I don't think my little brother really made that much sense at all, but it was clear to me that he was talking and giggling at someone or something. I still dismiss this as children have imaginary friends. To my knowledge now, my parents told me that an older couple actually came by and looked for their buried item that they used to protect the house, and they dug up the whole backyard and it couldn't be found. I remember the backyard looking like a bunch of mines went off. My twin brother told me that he's awoken to an angel-like figure that had a smile from ear to ear. He now sleeps on his stomach as I do. I always felt watched. Years later, when I was 12 to 14 years, I was living in a house in Charlotte, North Carolina. I didn't have much going on there, however. One night I woke up from my sleep and I saw 2 black figures on each side of me. I then saw a small white orb fly right through these black figures, and I heard, "Don't be scared, son." Now, this was really scary. Even to this day, I'm kind of like, what the hell was that? Since that event has happened, I now go to sleep on my stomach. One of those days, I saw a black shadow behind me as I was in the bathroom brushing my teeth. I quickly ran into my bedroom and hid under the sheets. I've also seen a black shadow enter my twin brother's room. I wonder if he's had anything happen to him back then. Currently, I have nightmares from time to time about that house, and how my twin brother gets trapped in the house, and my little brother and I go in there to save him, and we get possessed. I suddenly wake up sweating. I've had this dream multiple times, and it always stops at the same time, and I always wake up all sweaty. Back then, I'd always keep my fan on in my room, and I used to call it heaven. Oh, I was so wrong with the shit that's happened in that house. Fast forward 17 years to now, 24. I now live in Lancaster, Ohio. Nothing really has happened here except for once in a while I feel like something is watching me in the corner of the room as I try to sleep. It's like an eerie feeling that I feel like something's going to jump out at me. I've recently played with a Ouija board and nothing really happened, except for a flash of a camera kept going off. That's just about it. I'm going to ask my brothers if they've witnessed anything. It would be nice to see what they've gone through. I think I witnessed more earlier in life because children have a more open mind and don't really judge. I have a mixed belief system. I don't think the devil is as bad as everyone claims him to be. I don't think all demons are bad. Perhaps they are just souls who were murdered and weren't ready for death and need to find the light. Perhaps it's just negative energy put out by us humans. Who knows, really? But I do know that some strange, unexplained shit has happened throughout my life. Who knows if God is real, or even Lucifer. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 139. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Where are we now? Friday. Sorry, the heat tends to make my brain go funny. My sister called me earlier, and as she often does, when she calls, she generally waits till I'm as far away from my phone as could be the most inconvenient for me. But she called, and when I eventually got downstairs, naturally, the phone stopped ringing, and I somehow forgot how to work a phone. My brain was that addled by the heat. Eventually I got it working and I called her and everything was fine. Anyway. Well, by the time you guys are getting this, I should hopefully have the last components for the new PC build I'll be doing on Saturday. And fingers and toes and whatever crossed. Well, I say a new PC build, it's kind of new. There's certain components in my current PC, like the PSU I bought a few months back to replace the one that had broken it. And when I bought it with an eye to actually building a new PC eventually anyway. So that will go in there, because it was bought for this new super powerful PC. Hard drives are fine, so I can save that and the operating system. RAM is still okay, so the RAM will get transferred over. Let me think, what else? Oh yeah, the Blu-ray drive. I don't really use a lot of discs, but I do still have some data on some of them that's quite important, so the disk drive will go in as well. Or at least I think it will, actually. I'm gonna have to... I'm gonna have to think about... I'm trying to think of the case I ordered. Is there room for that on it? If there's not, I can buy an external one, I suppose, but that's an expenditure, another expenditure I'd rather have to make right now. But if I need to, I need to. Or maybe I could get an enclosure for that one. Nah, we'll see. Many possibilities. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.